everybody, and welcome to another video. Today we are going to talk about my magical Readathon TBR. So, Magical Readathon is a readathon that is hosted typically in like April, I want to say, and August, but this year the August version is going to be moved into September, and actually I think that that is even more fitting, because this is a readathon that was originally inspired by the Harry Potter series and has now moved away into its own creative little world. It is hosted by G over in the channel Bookworm, which I will link down below, and G is just an amazing creator with a ton of inspiration, creativity, imagination, and she's made this entire new world for us to inhabit. And so the idea is that we are going to a magical academy within this magical world, and so the month of September, which for a lot of people at least here over in Europe is the sort of traditional going back to school month, seems like a fitting choice for that. And so I am doing two callings. I always do two callings. Last semester I was unable to complete it within the month, but G is very flexible when it comes to that, and so you were allowed to continue on beyond that, and so I did catch up to the readathon in the month, like even in the weeks after that. This month I'll probably have somewhat of a head start because she has introduced this new element that actually makes it much more achievable, in the sense that you can like legitimately count books that you've started prior to the month, and that will be the case for a lot of my books, of course, because I am doing my every book all at once project. So every book that is currently on my physical cart has already been started, and so if I didn't have this flexibility to have started something before the start of the month, then I would have to read all new books, which I would definitely have failed at that. So let's have a look. I'm doing two callings. As I said, I'm combining the Rift Architect calling with the Illusionist Rogue calling. My character is a woman called Robin, who is basically a assassin, and so she is basically honing some of her assassin skills. She legitimizes her time at the academy by going after the Rift Architect calling, but she's taking some extra classes which form part of the Illusionist Rogue curriculum, which are skills that she will be appreciating when she is doing when she is performing assassinations. So let's check out what is required for me to read. So first up we have the class of Inscription, in which I need to reach the Q mark. The first class here is the O mark. So for the first level, the O mark, I need to read a book that has all of the letters of my first name in the title. For this one, I have chosen to go for The Principle of Moments by Esme Jikimi Pearson. This is an Illumicrated book that I still have to make my way through. I am also only 2% into this one, I think, so this will be one of the chunkier page counts for the month of September. This is a queer sci-fi, and that is really all that I know about this book, actually. So I'll be eager to see whether this is one that I get along with or not. Sci-fi is a genre that I don't dabble as much in as I do with fantasy, but I've had some good experiences even this year, so it would be great for this to be another win for the sci-fi genre. Next up we have the title color wheel. So for the Q mark, I needed to spin a color wheel, and that would give me the color of the title of the book that I need to read. Now, I have done that. You can see the results of that here. And so I landed on Cerulean. This is not an easy title color, and I actually have books on my TBR that have that color, or that I feel I count close enough to that color, but they're counting for different prompts, and for some of them at least I'm like, no, I definitely don't want to be changing that. So potentially things will move around a little bit in order for me to be able to properly count it. There's one prompt which is like a book mentioned in G's video prompt that I could potentially move around, that I can have the book that I count for that count for something else, and then I can potentially count that something else book for this. But currently this is empty. Currently I have nothing here. Currently this is the one that will have to like be decided in the last moment, because I'm not finding many perspectives in here that I'm like, oh yeah, I want to be like, sure, I want to be reading them, but do I want to be adding them into this massive project of all the books at once? So there is a book, for example, that's currently is maybe like the most likely one to make it on here, and that is like an Amor Tau's book, which is Rules of Civility. This is the author of A Gentleman in Moscow, which is a book that I was interested in, and I think this is their newest book, and I'm really not sure about anything else except for the fact that I did want to give their writing a go at some point in time. So in that sense it could be something to add, but it would be something to add, whereas I would hope to not have to add anything, which I'll definitely have to add anything, so it's depending on what I'll end up deciding that I want to add, whether I need to do a shuffle around or not. Second course that I need to take is Spells and Incantation, in which I need to reach, come on, turn around, in which I need to reach a D level. And so this is also where the potential swaps are going to be happening. First up here we have a 5-star prediction. Now I do have a book that I expect more of than the one that I'm gonna nominate here, but I need that book for something else. And that book is actually involved in the whole shuffle thing, so maybe this entire TBR is just a lie, guys, and maybe I'm going to be reading completely different things to what I'm telling you guys. But so, the book that I'm going to be choosing for my 5-star prediction is The Sky on Fire by Jen Lyons, which all I know is it's a dragon book. It's the September dragon book for my dragon read-along, and Jen Lyons is the author of A Court of Dragons, which I absolutely adored. And so I'm hoping that The Sky on Fire is going to be another success story for me with Jen Lyons. This is inspired by the Dragon Riders of Pern, I think, which I've never read, so I don't have any sort of frame of reference when it comes to this. Yeah, that's going to be all that I'm telling you guys about this book. But so yeah, this is why this is a 5-star prediction. Next up, the Q level prompt is to read a book that is shown in one of G's videos. There are definitely a lot of books that are shown in her videos. I specifically looked at a video that had like the anticipated reads for this year, thanks to Kitty's suggestion. And there I found a couple of books. And so that's why I say that there is the potential for me to kind of shuffle here, because I can choose one of the other books that she mentions in there, or I could even go and look for another book that she has mentioned at some point in time to potentially swap this out with. And maybe that would be somewhat of a smart thing, to kind of choose something that is also on that TBR card here and just kind of try and find it in some of her videos so that I could count it. But for the time being, we'll just stick to the original plan, and the original plan is that this is the point where I'm going to be inserting The Will of the Many by James Islington. So The Will of the Many is a book that I've really been wanting to read, and so I'm happy that this one is going to definitely be featured within the month of September, because it is also the read-along book for my guild within the Readathon. So in the Readathon there are 4 guilds, so 4 houses that you're part of. I'm part of the Mindwalker's house, and The Will of the Many will be our buddy read for the month. I don't tend to, like, it will be the first time that I read the buddy read, but that's also just because it's finally a book that I actually intended to read. And so The Will of the Many is a book in which we have somebody trying to infiltrate into a academy because he wants to destroy it from the inside because of something that happened to his brother. Don't know more about it. I read this first chapter, and this first chapter was really intriguing. It's one of those books that in that first week in which I read all of the books that I currently have on my TBR, this is one of the highlights of that week, and so I'm very eager to dive back into it and have this become a priority now. But so yeah, that book can potentially shuffle around into some other prompts. For example, the next one. The next prompt is to steal from somebody else's TBR. So I could steal the will of the many from any Mindwalker who is participating in the read along, but there are even some other guilds. There's another guild that I'm not entirely sure of which guild it is anymore at this point in time, but they also have the will of the many as their buddy read. So there are going to be a ton of people reading it, so I could definitely put it into that prompt without any issues. And I think I saw somebody else, oh yeah, I just saw Becca from Becca and the Books also put the will of the many on her magical readathon TBR, so I could also just officially steal it from Becca and then it would also count. But what I have for the time being put there is The Phoenix Keeper by S.A. McLean. And this title is either green or cerulean. I kind of feel like it depends on the light whether I see this more as green. Now I see it as green, for example, but there have been moments in which I looked at it and I was like, no, it's actually much more cerulean. So I think the combination with like the orange and the white maybe is creating some sort of optical illusion where it's unclear which color this is, but so it could potentially work for this. This is the July Illumicrate book. It is a cozy fantasy which we're looking at a magical zoo. Our zookeeper is responsible for the enclosure of a specific type of phoenix which is very much endangered, and so she is trying to she's basically waiting for news to be able to start a sort of breeding program over in the zoo. And at the point in time in which I am in this book, which is like 10% in or something like that, she's just been hit with some bad news. Now, this is very much a shy person as our protagonist, and so I'm hoping that within this book we will see her opening up and kind of coming into her own power and kind of realizing the expertise that she has within the field and finding ways to more confidently share that with others around her. And then the final class that I need to take for the Rift Architect calling is Conjuration. I need to reach a Q level within that one. First up, I'm going to need a bat on the cover. For that, I am reading The Silver Blood Promise. So for those who've been following my vlogs, you know that I am halfway through this one already. So the Silver Blood Promise by James Logan is, I would have to refer it now, thanks to Tufty, as a heist novel, I guess, to some extent. This is a novel in which we are trying to figure out the identity of the killer of our protagonist's father. Him and his father had a falling out at some point in the past due to him dropping out of the academy, and at the beginning of this book he is informed of his father's death. Now his father left behind a note with 3 words on it, and this note will lead him on a chase to try and figure out who killed his father. Now, I don't like murder mystery, but this search for the identity of his father's killer is kind of the triggering point for an adventure, more than a sort of, in my opinion, boring gathering of clues. We are going off into unknown regions. We are exposed to criminal elements here or there. We have to break into a certain facility for information, amongst other things. We have to play some sort of a dangerous game to be allowed to meet somebody, and all of these types of things. So there are a lot of like fun fantasy adventure elements into this, much more than there are murder mystery elements to this. So I have been putting this one on pause this week so far, and I'm very eager that in September I'm going to be able to dive back into it and continue the story. Next up for Q, I have to read a book that has won an award. And so for that one, basically this book was pushed upon me for 3 different prompts that I have to read this month. And so this one was pushed upon me and finally successfully or grudgingly accepted is A Memory Called Empire. I don't know the title of the author, the name of the author at the moment. This is a sci-fi book as far as I'm aware. There have definitely been reasons why this book has been high, like it's been not like high on my TBR as in like, oh, I'm waiting for the moment, but one that I definitely have been wanting to try, and I'm sure that has to do with the opinions of Sarah and Scylla over on the Discord of Queens, Witches and Valkyries, but I just don't remember anymore what it was that they were saying about it that made me all that interested in it. And so at this point in time I don't really know much more about it, except that I think it is also queer and that it is sci-fi, or maybe it's one of those that I think is sci-fi but actually it is fantasy. I want to say it's sci-fi. It also has a very sci-fi-ish cover, but yeah, that's really all that I still remember about this. And so this is the type of book where I haven't been prioritizing it at this point in time at all, because it's not on my TBR, but also because I feel like, yeah, I would need to be reacquainted with the reasoning behind it to figure out whether it is really worth it. But hey, we will take this leap of faith and we will jump, because Elena over on the chat in which we were kind of figuring out what we were all reading was really adamant about this being an amazing read, and so I'm going to trust her judgment on that. And then things are not over yet, because we're doing a second calling, as I said. So for Illusionist Rogue, the first thing that I have to do is I need to take a class in shapeshifting, and the prompt is jewelry, a book with jewelry on the cover, and luckily crowns count as jewelry, because otherwise I would not have anything here. So the book that will count for this is Deathless by Rob J. Hayes. Don't ask me anything about this book. This is a trilogy of trilogies, basically. So we will have 3 trilogies consisting of different points within the history of the same world. This is the middle trilogy. The prologue trilogy and middle trilogy are short books. The sort of like final trilogy is a massive book so far. So we'll see what happens with the second books. Whether it would also be interesting if like the short length books differ between the different trilogies. That would also actually be interesting. But so yeah, I have no information to give you here. I read the first chapter, but I really wouldn't be able to tell you anything about it anymore, especially since I read them like at the same time as I read the other books in the trilogy, and it's just like, it just confused the hell out of me to read 3 first chapters in 3 series that are taking place in the same world with some of the same characters over different periods of time. So it's the concept that sold me on this series. It's the concept that made me want to try these. Next up, for Art of Illusion, I had to have a random emoji selector choose an emoji for me, and it chose the 2 masks. So I need something with masks, I need something with theater potentially, I need something with acting potentially, with putting on a face, putting on a mask, and I don't really have something sold for this prompt yet, but potentially it'll be the Bloodstones. I also don't know the author here. I know nothing about the story. This is absolutely something that's put on my TBR because it has a gorgeous cover. I probably knew what this was about when I put it on there, and then I was like, oh yeah, sounds interesting. I do have access to the ebook for this or the audiobook through Storytel, so to that extent I do have access to it, but I think it's also relatively long. To that extent it's like something that I don't necessarily want to put on there. So if you have suggestions for me, let me know. But I don't like theater in literature, for example. I have found that out through like what's the 2nd or 3rd book in the Loch Lamore series. I also don't really like Station 11. So I don't tend to enjoy theater in literature. So unless it's going to be a real play, I can always reread The Importance of Being Earnest, for example, if I just need to quickly get rid of this prompt. But yeah, give me some suggestions here. Next up, for that same class, I need to read like all 3 levels of this class. So the 2nd level is read a prequel. For that I will be finishing Ruins of Smoke by João F. Silva. I will be like 70% into this book already before the start of the month, because I had to, like I read the first 50% for it for week 2 of my project, and for week 3 this is also part of my plan to continue in it. So I will be 70% into it, so I will be reading a very limited amount of pages within this one, but this is the prequel to the Smokesmith series, and the prequel kind of confuses me because I don't really know at what time to place this. I had my assumptions about what the prequel would be about, but I don't actually think that that is the case. And the prequel is kind of interesting as well in its structure, because so far we've been following like 2 chapters or so, always from a different perspective. So we start off with one perspective, we read 2 chapters from them, then we moved on to another perspective, had 2 chapters, and so on and so forth. And so I'm halfway through it now, and I think that that will probably be how we are continuing for the rest of this book, which I think is an interesting structure, because you're just like, you're shifting perspectives the entire time, and it would be interesting to see how that's going to kind of like come together towards the end of this novella. And then for the final level here, I had to read a book with memory in the title, which is the first time memory called Empire was suggested here. And for that I will be reading The Lantern of Lost Memories. This is a translated book from Japanese. I don't remember the author, I only remember that there's a cat on the title, and that there's a cat on the cover, and that it has a cerulean title. But yeah. So this is another option for shifting here. I can count this for the cerulean title, but then I need a new book with memory in the title. So yeah, we'll just have to see what happens there. I don't need to know more than that this is a book by a Japanese author that has a cat on the cover. I'm sorry, you really don't need to do more than do that, and then I'm sold on giving it a try. And then the final book on this TBR, for psionics and divination, I need to read a favorite author's debut. And this is the killer, because I don't really consider many authors as favorite authors. The only one that I was like, prior to having to think about this now, always saying was like Brandon Sanderson, because it's like the author that I've read the most from. But I have had somewhat of a think about this, and so I've decided that I'm gonna put Sayaka Murata as a favorite author, which she absolutely is. I have loved the books by her that I've read, and I'm always waiting for new books by her to come out, so she absolutely qualifies. And so then I will be rereading Convenience Store Woman, which is much smaller than rereading Brandon Sanderson's debut, which would be Elantris. It would also be nice because Convenience Store Woman is a very different type of book, and so I have a ton of fantasy already on this TBR, so it would be nice to have a little bit of a change of pace with a litfic, I guess, read on there. But so yeah, that'll be the TBR for Magical Readathon. As indicated, it isn't set in stone. I can make changes here or there where I need to, or where inspiration strikes, and I will definitely still need to fit in that one prompt, so currently the color of the title prompt with a cerulean title. So definitely give me suggestions for books that you think that work there, preferably short ones. So yeah, with that I'm going to be ending this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Definitely let me know if you're participating in Magical Readathon as well, and if you have a video like this, definitely let me know as well, and then I will check it out. And so yeah, hope you guys have a lovely day. See you guys for the next video. Bye!